Greetings and welcome to another lecture in Introductory Psychology. This lecture is on an aspect of social psychology, namely persuasion. Now, persuasion is an attempt to try to get someone to change an attitude. Remember, attitudes are learned, therefore they can be unlearned or they can be modified. So when someone is persuading you, they're trying to get you to change your mind, they're trying to get you to believe something or do something or feel something. Now, there are a number of things that go into persuasion. This is not something that is easily done. And all of these things are weighed and measured when a person is deciding whether or not they are convinced and therefore will change their attitude. Now, the first thing that people consider when they are being asked to change their attitude is who is asking them to do it. What is the source? This is why, for instance, commercials during political seasons that are trying to get a person to change their mind or to vote for a candidate or not vote for a candidate have to tell you that that's what they're trying to do. This commercial is funded by blah, blah, blah. Now, you'll notice they wait to do that until the end of the commercial, because if they told you that at the beginning of the commercial, although there are political commercials that do that, normally the ones that are actually from the candidate, and maybe the more positive ones that are from the candidate, that seems to be my experience, will actually tell you at the beginning, this is from, this I'm this politician and I've endorsed this message, sort of thing. Now, the communicator is the person who is actually giving the message. Now, the source might be a company, for instance, but the communicator is the spokesperson. Okay? A lot of times, the source may be coming from a political party or a business, but for the communicator, they pick either a real person or an actor portraying a real person. Because the idea is that if it's a real person, particularly if it looks like someone we can trust and someone who's attractive, remember attractiveness goes along with all kinds of good things in person perception, that we're going to be more likely then to listen to what they say. Okay? After all, who are you going to listen to, a salesperson or your neighbor when they're talking about a particular thing that they want you to buy? They're talking about a car, they're talking about a kitchen appliance. We like to listen to real people or reasonable facsimiles thereof. And so a lot of times, although the source may be a business, the communicator may be a quote-unquote real person. The message is what they are saying. I mean, it's just what it sounds like. The message is what they are telling you. And in reality, you would think that the message would work best if the people would just give you, the company would just give you their side. The thing is, though, it works a lot better when companies give you both sides and ask you to choose. Now, yes, they're going to make the side that they are on look a whole lot better. Okay? Then they're going to make the other side look. But at least they give what's called lip service. We're going to mention the other side, even though God knows you wouldn't want to do that. You see this sometimes, for instance, when they do the comparison. We have our paper towel. Look, our paper towel picks up a lot more than theirs does. That sort of thing. To actually show you. Now, a lot of times the message also might be trying to elicit an emotion. Okay? The problem with that, though, is that when you're trying to elicit an emotion, you don't want to create too much of one. Because if you create too much of an emotion, people are going to get so caught up in their emotion that they're not going to remember what the commercial was about. That's the problem with some of these commercials, for instance, that are absolutely hilarious. You watch this commercial, it's hysterical. Right? The message is, the commercial is just so fun, or the communicator is just making you laugh hysterically. And at the end, you have no recognition of what that particular message was. You may watch the commercial, but if you don't leave humming the message, so to speak, then the commercial itself is a failure. So the message is what they're saying, what they're trying. We are better than them. Buy this, not that. Vote for us. Don't vote for them. That sort of thing. The message, if you buy this, then wonderful things will happen, or whatever. So the message is what they're actually trying to say. The target is who they're aiming the message at. If you flip around on the cable dial, It's sometimes interesting to watch commercials from the same companies on different channels because companies will make commercials aimed at certain audiences. If you have one, for instance, that is aimed at young people, it's likely going to use very different music and perhaps even spokespeople or editing techniques than one aimed at older people. You're not going to necessarily put an old person as the communicator in a commercial aimed at young people, and vice versa. And this is a problem actually sometimes because, and notice how these are all feeding off one another. It can be difficult to separate them. But when you get commercials, for instance, for dieting or for weight loss or for clothing for people who are, shall we say, heavier than average, or is what I like to call fat lady clothes because that's what I wear, you want to make sure the models are attractive that are modeling your clothes, but you also don't want to make sure, you're walking a fine line because if you're fat enough, the odds are you're not going to look good in those clothes. But if you put skinny people in the clothes, then the fat people are going to say, "Wait a minute, I don't look like that. What do you mean?" Or on the other hand, they might say, "Ooh, if I buy those clothes, I'll look like that." There's lots of stuff that goes into this. Okay? But commercials tend to be aimed at a particular target. There's a difference between commercials about toys that are aimed at children and commercials about toys that are aimed at parents in terms of the target, in terms of the message. For children, it might point out how much fun it is. For parents, it might point out how educational it is. You might have different communicators. For aiming at children, you might have children in there. Aiming at parents, you might have a parent in. I mean, it's really interesting, all of these things that go in the factors. But what also needs to be taken into account, it's not just the source, the target, and the message. It's also exactly how people are processing this information. And one of the better known theories here is what's called the elaboration likelihood model. And what this boils down to is, essentially, how do people process the information? Now, the central route processing says that what people do is they focus on the content of the message. They focus on what the message says. If the message says A, B, C, and D, that's what they focus on. That's the central route. Okay? It's the content that's important, not how it's dressed up. It's what the commercial says that is important. The thing is, though, a lot of people also go for peripheral route, it's called. Now, peripheral means to the sides, like the central nervous system versus the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, it's in the central. Peripheral nervous system, everything else out to the sides. Peripheral route processing says that people will look at things other than the message. They may focus more on the source of the communicator. What does the person look like? How are they dressed? How are they speaking? Okay? They more focus on how long the message is, how short the message is, the background of the commercial, the music that is used. They're elaborating on it. They're not just sticking to the message. They're working on the things that are around it. Okay? And people will sometimes ignore the message if the stuff that surrounds the message is strong enough. Okay? For instance, the message might be, take this, take this medication and it will help cure your headaches. But if it's got someone in the commercial, for instance, who doesn't look trustworthy, then you might just ignore the message itself and just focus on, they don't look trustworthy, I'm not going to buy it. I don't believe it. On the other hand, you have somebody who just listens to the message. That person said it works. I'm going to stick with it. So you could tell with this that everything hooks into everything else. It's very difficult to tease out one thing from this because the communicator can affect the target. The message can affect the target. Both of those can affect how exactly you're going to process this. When you put where the source is from, who the source is, are you going to believe something more if it comes from a business or if it comes from a person? Are you going to, oh my goodness. It's very, very tangled. So, like the book says, it's very difficult to separate these things. It's a very complicated, very, very complicated process. But it's good to be able to pick these out. If for no other reason, then it allows you to know what techniques people are using to try to get you to do something. And it can be a lot of fun to sit back and look at commercials and start saying, okay, how are they manipulating me? How are they making me want to do something? It's almost like compliance. I have another lecture on compliance. Foot in the door in the face, guilt induction, same sort of thing here. They overlap very much. But when you want to change someone's attitude, you need to take all of these things into account. Believe me, persuasion is not one size fits all.